They laughed. Every single one of them laughed when the lawyer read my inheritance out loud. While my cousins walked away with millions, vacation homes, and trust funds that could buy small islands, I got a plane ticket. One first-class seat to Zurich, Switzerland. That's it. My name is Sienna, I'm 23 years old, and that moment in the lawyer's office, watching my family double over with laughter at my expense, should have destroyed me. My cousin Jennifer actually snorted wine through her nose. Marcus patted my head like I was a child who'd just received a participation trophy. David didn't even try to hide his smirk. A vacation. Jennifer wheezed between laughs. Oh, sweetie, at least you can sell the ticket for, what, $2,000? Better than nothing. Marcus shook his head, grinning. Classic Grandpa Harrison. Always dramatic. Probably sending you to pick up some dusty photo albums. But here's what none of them knew. Here's what made their laughter so beautifully, perfectly ironic. That plane ticket? It wasn't a consolation prize. It was the key to everything. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a room full of people who were supposed to love you, only to realize they see you as nothing? Have you ever watched someone's true colors explode out of them the second money enters the conversation? Maybe you've been the one sitting quietly while everyone else celebrates what they think they deserve, and you're left wondering if you even matter. If any of that sounds familiar, you need to hear what happened next. Because my grandfather, the brilliant, self-made billionaire who built a hotel empire from absolutely nothing, he didn't forget me. He didn't overlook me. In fact, he'd been planning something for 15 years. Something my greedy, entitled cousins never saw coming. See, there's a problem in families like mine. When money gets involved, people stop seeing each other as human beings. They start seeing dollar signs, inheritance percentages, and who gets what piece of the pie. My cousins spent their entire lives kissing up to Grandpa Harrison, posting photos with him on social media, showing up to family dinners they used to skip. All performance. All fake. Meanwhile, I was just there. The orphan granddaughter. The one who went to state school instead of Harvard. The one whose parents married down according to family gossip. I didn't have the designer clothes or the luxury apartments. I just had Sunday breakfasts with my grandfather, reading him newspapers and actually listening when he talked. But that ticket to Switzerland? It changed everything. And I mean everything. What my cousins discovered 3 weeks later made Jennifer choke on her champagne, made Marcus's jaw literally drop open, and made David go pale as a ghost. Before I tell you exactly what happened, do me a favor. Hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And subscribe, because this story gets so much better, and the revenge? It's the kind that makes you believe in karma again. Trust me, you won't want to miss what that plane ticket really meant. To understand why that reading cut so deep, you need to know who my grandfather really was. Harrison Montgomery didn't inherit a dime. He arrived in New York at 22 years old with $50 sewn into his jacket and a work ethic that would make most people exhausted just hearing about it. He worked 3 jobs: dishwasher, night janitor, weekend porter, saving every penny until he could buy his first property, a rundown motel in New Jersey that most people wouldn't let their dog sleep in. 40 years later, he owned the Montgomery Hotel Collection. 15 luxury properties from Boston to Miami. A real estate portfolio that made financial magazines write features about him. Investments in tech companies, art collections, private holdings across 3 continents. My grandfather built an empire and everyone wanted a piece of it. I came into his life when I was 7 years old. My parents, his youngest daughter Claire, and my dad, a high school history teacher, died in a car accident on a rainy Tuesday in March. One moment, I had a normal childhood. The next, I was standing in my grandfather's mansion wearing a black dress that was too big for me, listening to relatives whisper about what would happen to poor little Sienna. Grandfather Harrison took me in without hesitation. And while my aunts and uncles and cousins tolerated this arrangement, they made sure I understood my place. Marcus was the crown prince of the family. 6 years older than me, Harvard MBA, sharp suits, sharper tongue. He worked in consulting, which apparently meant traveling to expensive cities and advising companies while living on grandfather's dime. Marcus had this way of looking at you that made you feel like you were wasting his valuable time. When I'd arrive at family dinners, he'd nod in my direction like I was the help. "State school treating you well, Sienna?" He'd ask with that smile that never reached his eyes. Must be nice to have low expectations. Jennifer was worse in her own way. 29, perfectly highlighted hair, engagement ring that cost more than most cars. She'd mastered the art of insults wrapped in concern. "Oh honey, you're wearing that? Well, I guess not everyone needs designer labels." So authentic. She'd post Instagram photos with grandfather, captions about family legacy and blessed, racking up thousands of likes while I sat in the corner, invisible. David, the youngest of the three at 25, simply pretended I didn't exist. He'd spent the last 5 years finding himself in Europe, translation, partying in Barcelona and Amsterdam on family money. At gatherings, he'd look straight through me. If I spoke, he'd check his phone. I was a ghost in my own family. The three of them had grown up together, united by their sense of entitlement and their complete certainty that they'd inherit everything that mattered. They treated grandfather's wealth like it was already theirs, making plans for their hotels, their properties, their future. But here's what they never understood. While they were collecting designer bags and Instagram followers, I was collecting something far more valuable: time with grandfather. Every Sunday morning, 7 a.m. sharp, I'd meet him at his favorite diner. Not some fancy restaurant, a regular diner with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the Reagan administration. We'd sit in the back corner, and he'd quiz me. "Sienna, if you had $10,000 to invest today, where would you put it? What makes a business sustainable versus just profitable? Look at this hotel's financial statement. Tell me what's wrong." My cousins thought he was humoring me. The old man keeping the orphan entertained. They'd roll their eyes when I'd cancel plans to spend Saturday mornings touring his properties with him, learning about maintenance costs and occupancy rates and why location matters more than luxury in real estate. But grandfather was teaching me. Really teaching me. Not because he thought I'd inherit his business, at least. That's what I believed then, but because he wanted me to understand the value of building something real. "Money comes and goes," he told me once, his weathered hand wrapped around a coffee mug. "Any fool can spend it. Takes wisdom to create it. Takes character to know what really matters." Then he'd say this phrase that I'd hear over and over throughout the years. "Sienna, remember this. Value isn't always visible." I'd nod, not fully understanding what he meant. I thought he was talking about investments, hidden opportunities in the market, assets that didn't show up on balance sheets. I had no idea he was talking about people. About me. When grandfather's health started failing, everything changed. Suddenly, Marcus had time for hospital visits between his consulting gigs. Jennifer posted tearful bedside photos with hashtags about cherishing family. David flew back from Europe, cleaned up, started talking about making grandpa proud and continuing the legacy. They swarmed around him like sharks sensing blood in the water, each one positioning themselves as the devoted grandchild, the worthy heir, the one who truly cared. I just showed up with newspapers and read to him. The Wall Street Journal, local news, sports scores, whatever he wanted to hear that day. Some days he'd be alert, squeezing my hand and asking about my classes. Other days he'd drift in and out, but I stayed anyway. 3 weeks before he died, his grip on my hand tightened during one of these readings. His voice came out thin, barely above a whisper. "Sienna," he said, his eyes locked on mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Remember what I taught you about value?" I nodded, tears threatening to spill. "It's not always visible." His face softened into that knowing smile, the one that always made me feel like we shared a secret the rest of the world couldn't access. "Good girl. You always understood." 2 weeks later, he was gone. The funeral was a performance. Jennifer wore designer black and cried into a monogrammed handkerchief for the cameras. Marcus delivered a eulogy about continuing grandfather's vision that made me want to scream. David stood there looking stoic and reformed, playing the role of devoted grandson to perfection. I sat in the back row, actually mourning the man who'd been my mentor, my teacher, my only real family. The will reading was scheduled for the following Monday at 2 p.m. I almost stayed home. What was the point? I already knew how this would play out. The empire would be divided among the golden children, and I'd get some polite acknowledgement. Maybe a small trust fund. Maybe nothing at all. But something told me to go. Maybe it was grandfather's voice in my head, that phrase he repeated so often. Value isn't always visible. So I went. Mr. Morrison's law office was all dark wood paneling and leather chairs that smelled like old money and older secrets. Marcus arrived first, sitting at the head of the conference table like he already owned the place. Jennifer came in with her husband Richard, a Wall Street trader whose eyes calculated the worth of everything they landed on. David sprawled in his chair with manufactured casualness, scrolling through his phone. My Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert, grandfather's remaining children, took seats on either side of the cousins, their faces carefully blank. I took the empty chair closest to the door. The escape route. Mr. Morrison adjusted his reading glasses, looking every bit the attorney who'd spent 40 years guarding my grandfather's secrets. The envelope in his hands was thick, cream-colored, sealed with actual red wax. Grandfather always had a flair for the dramatic. "Before I begin," Mr. Morrison said, his voice carrying weight that made everyone sit up straighter, "Harrison wanted me to remind you all of something he often said." He paused, looking directly at me. "Value isn't always visible." My heart skipped. Those words. Our words. Mr. Morrison broke the wax seal and began to read. "To my grandson Marcus, who has shown such dedication to his career, I leave a trust fund of $5 million to pursue opportunities as he sees fit." Marcus tried to look humble, but I saw the satisfaction flash across his face. $5 million. Not bad for someone who'd barely spoken to grandfather outside of mandatory family events. "To my granddaughter Jennifer, I leave the family home in the Hamptons and $2 million. Jennifer actually squealed, then covered it with a cough. Her husband squeezed her hand, already calculating their new net worth. "To my grandson David, I leave $3 million and my collection of vintage automobiles." David sat up, his practiced nonchalance cracking into a genuine smile. The car collection alone was worth close to another $1 million. Aunt Patricia received $2 million and a property in Vermont. Uncle Robert got the same, plus grandfather's stake in a Boston hotel. With each announcement, I felt myself shrinking into that chair. Not because I expected anything, I'd made peace with being the outsider years ago, but because the message was so clear, so public. This was grandfather's final word on who mattered in this family. Mr. Morrison's voice shifted slightly. "To my granddaughter Sienna, who taught an old man that listening is sometimes worth more than speaking." I straightened up. Here it came. The token amount. The polite footnote. Enough to be mentioned, but not enough to matter. "I leave a first-class plane ticket to Zurich, Switzerland, departing November 1st, with accommodations at the Bahnhof Hotel for 1 week." Silence crashed through the room like a physical thing. Then Jennifer started laughing. It began as a snort she tried to suppress, but it erupted into full, gasping laughter. "A vacation?" He left her a vacation. Marcus joined in, his voice dripping with false sympathy that made my skin crawl. "Well, I guess that's sweet. Sienna, you can think of Grandpa while you're skiing or whatever. She can probably sell the ticket," David added, smirking at his phone. "Get what, $2,000 for it? Better than nothing, right?" Even Aunt Patricia couldn't hide the satisfaction pulling at her lips. Her daughter had gotten millions. The charity case had gotten a consolation prize. My face burned, but I kept my expression neutral. I'd learned years ago not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. But Mr. Morrison wasn't finished. His voice cut through the laughter like a blade. "Additionally, Sienna is to meet with the executor of a secondary trust upon arrival in Zurich. The details of this trust are confidential and will be revealed only to her." The laughter faltered slightly, but Jennifer waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please. It's probably some sentimental jewelry or old photographs. Maybe grandmother's pearls if she's lucky." "Classic Harrison," Marcus said, shaking his head with amusement. "Always had to add drama to everything. A whole trip to Switzerland for some dusty heirlooms and maybe a nice letter about being a good person." The room filled with their excited chatter about dividing up properties, investment strategies, who would get which hotel. They'd already moved on from me, from my inheritance, from whatever insignificant memories grandfather had left me in Switzerland. Mr. Morrison folded the will with careful precision, his expression completely unreadable. That concludes the reading. Sienna, I'll need to speak with you privately afterward. They filtered out, their voices echoing down the hallway. Jennifer's laugh. Marcus's phone call to his broker. David's plans for the vintage Porsche. Jennifer paused at the door, patting my shoulder with her perfectly manicured hand. Enjoy Switzerland, sweetie. At least you'll get a nice trip out of it. Maybe you can post some cute photos on Instagram. When the door finally closed behind them, the silence felt like relief. Mr. Morrison looked at me with something in his eyes I couldn't quite name. Respect, maybe. Or anticipation. Your grandfather, he said quietly, was the most brilliant man I've ever known. And he understood his family better than they ever understood themselves. What's really in Switzerland? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging in my chest. Mr. Morrison smiled, and suddenly I could see the young lawyer who'd helped grandfather build his empire from nothing. Your real inheritance, Sienna. Everything else. He gestured toward the door where my cousins had disappeared. That was just theater. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, hit that like button right now. Because what happened next proved that sometimes, the person everyone overlooks is actually the one holding all the cards. Mr. Morrison closed the blinds and returned to his desk. The laughter from the hallway had faded, replaced by the quiet hum of the office air system. Sienna, your grandfather came to me 15 years ago with a plan. He made me promise not to reveal anything until after his death and only to you. He pulled out a leather folder embossed with a Swiss banking logo I didn't recognize. What I can tell you is this. That plane ticket isn't a gift. It's a key. A key to what? That, I'm not authorized to say. But I will tell you this. Harrison spent the last decade and a half making very specific arrangements in Zurich. Arrangements that required absolute discretion. He slid the folder across the desk. Your flight leaves in 3 days. This contains your hotel confirmation, contact information for the Swiss executor, and a letter from your grandfather. Don't open the letter until you're on the plane. My hands shook as I took the folder. Mr. Morrison, they all think I got nothing. I know. His smile was small but genuine. Your grandfather was counting on that. I left his office with more questions than answers, but something had shifted inside me. Grandfather hadn't forgotten me. Whatever waited in Switzerland, he'd planned it. For me. My phone started buzzing before I even reached my car. Jennifer, OMG, just booked spa day with my Hampton house money. You enjoy your little European vacation, babe, Marcus. Hey, if you need help managing whatever grandpa left you, LOL a plane ticket, let me know. I'm happy to give you some financial advice. David didn't text. He posted an Instagram story of himself standing next to one of grandfather's vintage cars with the caption, "Legacy secured." Thanks, Grandpa. I stared at that post for a long time. David, who'd ignored grandfather for 5 years. David, who'd only shown up when the old man was dying. David, posing with a car like he'd earned it. Each text, each post, each casual dismissal of what I'd received made something harden inside me. Not anger exactly. Something colder. More focused. 3 days later, I boarded that flight to Zurich with nothing but a carry-on bag and grandfather's unopened letter burning a hole in my pocket. The first-class seat was near the window. Champagne appeared without me asking. The flight attendant smiled like she'd been told to take special care of me. As the plane lifted off, I finally opened the letter. The first line made tears spring to my eyes. My dearest Sienna, if you're reading this, then my greatest plan has finally begun. I had no idea what waited for me in Switzerland. But I was about to find out. Zurich in November was cold and beautiful in a way that felt almost unreal. The plane landed at dawn, and a driver was waiting at arrivals holding a sign with my name. Not Ms. Montgomery. Just Sienna. The Bahnhof Hotel wasn't what I expected. I'd assumed it would be nice. Grandfather never did anything halfway, but this was different. The lobby had marble floors that looked like they'd been there for centuries, and the staff treated me like I was someone important. The suite they gave me had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and the Alps in the distance. I read grandfather's letter 3 more times that night, trying to decode what he meant. They laughed at you today, didn't they? I knew they would. I've watched them my whole life, Sienna. Watched how they counted my money before I was even gone. Watched how they treated you like you were less than them because your father taught high school instead of trading stocks. But I also watched you. Every Sunday morning, every quiet conversation, every moment you chose to actually see me as a person instead of a bank account. That's why you're in Zurich. That's why everything is about to change. Trust Mr. Weber. He'll explain everything. Remember, value isn't always visible. You were always my real heir. Love, Grandfather Harrison. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at Bergman Private Banking, a building tucked away on a quiet street that looked more like a luxury apartment than a bank. No signs, no advertising, just a brass plaque beside an unmarked door. A receptionist led me to the 3rd floor, to an office with views that made my hotel room look ordinary. And there, behind a massive desk, sat a man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp blue eyes. Ms. Montgomery. I'm Klaus Weber. Please sit. His English was perfect, barely touched by an accent. Your grandfather spoke of you often. I feel I know you already. Mr. Weber, I don't understand why I'm here. He opened a folder. Not leather like Mr. Morrison's, but simple and professional. Let me start at the beginning. 15 years ago, your grandfather came to me with a proposal. He wanted to move a significant portion of his wealth outside the United States into Swiss trusts and holdings that would remain completely confidential. Why would he do that? Because, Ms. Montgomery, your grandfather was testing his family. He wanted to see who loved him and who loved his money. So he created 2 inheritances. One visible, one invisible. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? Mr. Weber pulled out a document and slid it across the desk. The inheritance your cousins received, the trust funds, the properties, the cars, that represents approximately 20% of your grandfather's total wealth. 20%. The words didn't make sense at first. But that was over $15 million. Correct. Which means the total estate is worth significantly more. He pulled out another document. Over the past 15 years, Harrison Montgomery quietly moved the remaining 80% of his assets into Swiss holdings. Real estate across Europe. Technology investments. Pharmaceutical companies. Art collections. All held in trusts that exist completely outside American probate law. My hands had gone numb. How much? The current valuation of the Swiss portfolio is $342 million. He said it casually, like he was discussing the weather. And as of this morning, you are the sole beneficiary of every trust, every holding, every asset your grandfather placed in Switzerland. The room tilted. $342 million. The number was so large it didn't feel real. That's not possible. Why would he? Because you were the only one who passed his test. Mr. Weber's expression softened. Your grandfather kept detailed notes. He documented every interaction with his grandchildren. Every birthday they missed, every phone call they ignored until they needed money. And he documented you. The Sunday breakfasts. The hospital visits. The way you listened when he talked about more than just business. He pulled out a leather journal, grandfather's handwriting filling page after page. My throat tightened seeing those familiar loops and angles. May I read you something he wrote 3 months before he died? Mr. Weber didn't wait for my answer. He wrote, Sienna asked me today what made me happiest about building my company. Not how much it's worth, not what I'll leave behind. What made me happiest? Marcus has never asked me that. Jennifer has never asked me that. David doesn't even know what my company does beyond generating his trust fund. But Sienna wanted to know about the joy of creation. That's when I knew for certain she was the one. Tears blurred my vision. I wiped them away quickly, but more kept coming. There's more. Mr. Weber handed me a sealed envelope, this one thick and heavy. Your grandfather recorded a video message. It's on this USB drive. He wanted you to watch it here, in this office, when you learn the truth. He set up a laptop and pressed play. Grandfather's face filled the screen. He looked healthier than those final weeks, sitting in what I recognized as this very office, wearing his favorite navy suit. Hello, sweetheart. If Klaus is showing you this, then you know the truth now. I imagine you're in shock. That's okay. Take your time with this. His smile was warm, familiar. I didn't do this to punish your cousins, though they certainly earned it. I did this because you deserved it. Because real legacy isn't about who can spend the most money. It's about who understands what money really is, a tool, not an identity. You never needed my wealth to know your worth. That's exactly why you're getting it. He leaned forward, his eyes intense even through the screen. Now listen carefully. You have a choice. You can keep this quiet, let your cousins think they won, and live your life in peace. Or you can go home and show them what they lost. What they threw away when they treated you like you were nothing. I won't tell you what to do. But I will tell you this. You have the power now. Use it wisely. Use it in a way that makes you proud. I love you, Sienna. I always have. The video ended. Mr. Weber closed the laptop. So, Ms. Montgomery, what would you like to do? I sat there for a long moment, thinking about Jennifer's mocking texts, Marcus's condescending offer of financial advice, David's Instagram post claiming a legacy he'd never earned. Then I thought about grandfather's phrase, value isn't always visible. They'd never seen my value. Never looked past their assumptions long enough to see who I really was. But they were about to. Comment below if you saw this coming. And keep watching, because the revenge I planned was going to be absolutely perfect. I spent 2 weeks in Switzerland setting everything up with Mr. Weber. Banking access, investment strategies, legal structures. When I finally boarded the plane back to the States, I wasn't the same person who'd left. I also wasn't stupid. Grandfather had taught me better than that. So when I landed, I didn't announce anything. Didn't post on social media. Didn't call anyone. I went back to my small apartment, unpacked my bag, and started planning. The texts from my cousins continued exactly as expected. Jennifer, how is Switzerland? Get any cute fondue pics? Marcus, hope you enjoyed your trip. Back to reality now, huh? David posted a photo of himself in front of his new Porsche with the caption, "Built different." I smiled at that one. He had no idea. For the next month, I worked quietly with a team of lawyers and financial advisors Mr. Weber had connected me with. I studied grandfather's American businesses inside and out. The hotel chain, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolios. And I made my move. Montgomery Hotel Collection had been struggling since grandfather's death. Marcus had been appointed interim CEO by the board. His MBA and confidence made him seem like the obvious choice. He'd spent the last month restructuring, cutting costs, making decisions that prioritized short-term profits over long-term sustainability. He was running it into the ground, basically. And he had no idea that the majority shareholder position had just been purchased by a Swiss holding company. My Swiss holding company. I walked into Montgomery Hotel Collection headquarters on a Wednesday morning in December wearing a suit that cost more than my old car. My new lawyer, Patricia Chin, walked beside me carrying a briefcase full of documents that would change everything. The receptionist looked confused when I asked for the executive floor. Do you have an appointment? I own the building, I said simply. I don't need one. Marcus was in grandfather's old office, my office now, feet up on the desk, on a phone call about cutting employee benefits to boost quarterly numbers. He glanced up when I walked in, his expression shifting from confusion to irritation. Sienna? What are you? He covered his phone. I'm in a meeting. You can't just walk in here. Patricia placed the documents on his desk. Mr. Montgomery, I'm Patricia Chin, representing the new majority shareholder of Montgomery Hotel Collection. As of 8 a.m. this morning, my client owns 68% of all outstanding shares. Marcus's face went pale. What are you talking about? Who? Me, I said, my voice level and calm. I'm your new boss, Marcus. And your interim CEO position? Terminated effective immediately. He stood up so fast his chair rolled backward. This is insane. You can't afford. How did you? Reality started creeping in. Switzerland. What the hell was in Switzerland? Grandfather's real inheritance. The 80% you didn't know about. I watched the color drain completely from his face as the math clicked into place. If they'd gotten 20% and that was over 15 million, then 80% meant $342 million, I confirmed. Give or take a few million depending on market fluctuations. Marcus grabbed the edge of the desk like he might fall over. But I wasn't done. Jennifer's Hamptons house sat on land that had been in the family for generations. What she didn't know was that grandfather had put that land in a separate trust, a Swiss trust that I now controlled. She owned the house. I owned everything underneath it and around it. The beach access, the driveway, even the gardens she loved so much. When my lawyer's letter arrived explaining that her property rights were significantly limited and that any renovations required my approval, she called me screaming. "You can't do this. This is my house. It's your house on my land, Jennifer. I'm not taking it away. I'm just making sure you understand what you actually inherited versus what you thought you inherited." The silence on the other end was delicious. David was last. His $3 million trust fund was impressive until he learned that I'd just donated $5 million to his favorite charity in grandfather's name. Then another $10 million to establish the Harrison Montgomery Scholarship Fund for first-generation college students. The news coverage was everywhere. Montgomery heiress establishes massive educational fund. David's Instagram post about being built different looked pathetic next to headlines about my philanthropy. The family emergency meeting happened exactly 2 weeks after I'd taken over the company. Everyone crammed into Mr. Morrison's conference room, the same room where they'd laughed at my plane ticket. Nobody was laughing now. Mr. Morrison confirmed what they'd already figured out but couldn't quite believe. Harrison Montgomery divided his estate specifically. 20% remained in America, distributed as outlined in the will. 80% was moved to Switzerland over a 15-year period. Sienna Montgomery is the sole beneficiary of the Swiss holdings. Aunt Patricia looked like she'd aged 10 years. Uncle Robert stared at the table. Marcus's jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Jennifer's voice came out small, broken. "Why her?" I answered before Mr. Morrison could. "Because I loved him. Not his money. Just him." I didn't gloat. Didn't rub it in. I simply stood up, straightened my jacket, and prepared to leave. "Wait," Marcus said, his voice desperate. "Sienna, we're family. We can work together on this." I was wrong about, "You weren't wrong, Marcus. You were exactly who you've always been. The difference is now you know what it costs." I left them sitting there in that conference room, finally understanding what grandfather had been trying to teach them all along. Value isn't always visible. But consequences? Those show up eventually. That was 6 months ago. Today, I run Montgomery Hotel Collection the way grandfather would have wanted. I reinstated the employee benefits Marcus cut. Invested in sustainable renovations. Opened 2 new properties that prioritize community impact over pure profit margins. The company is thriving in ways it never did under temporary management. I still have those Sunday morning breakfasts, except now I'm meeting with young entrepreneurs who remind me of grandfather, people building something real from nothing. I've funded 17 small businesses in the last 4 months. Not handouts. Investments in people who have the character to build something that matters. The scholarship fund I established has already changed 12 lives. First-generation college students who understand what it means to work for something, who won't take their education for granted because nobody handed it to them. As for my cousins, they're still wealthy. They still have their inheritances. But Jennifer sold the Hamptons house. Turns out owning a home on someone else's land was more complicated than she wanted to deal with. Marcus took a job at a competing firm, no longer the golden boy with the family empire behind him. David's still in Europe, still finding himself, but his Instagram posts have fewer likes these days. They've all tried to apologize in their own ways. Awkward phone calls. Carefully worded emails. Jennifer even showed up at my office once, mascara running, talking about how she didn't understand what grandfather was doing. I was polite. Professional. But I didn't forget. Because here's what I learned from all of this. Character reveals itself when people think you have nothing to offer them. The way Marcus looked through me at family dinners, the way Jennifer packaged her cruelty as concern, The way David erased my existence entirely, that showed me exactly who they were. And grandfather saw it too. For 15 years, he watched and planned and built a test that none of them realized they were taking. The quiet ones were often the most dangerous. Not because we're plotting revenge while everyone else is talking, but because we're paying attention. We're learning. We're becoming something they never expected us to be. Real legacy isn't about how much money you leave behind. It's about the wisdom you pass down, the values you instill, the people you invest in who will carry those lessons forward. Grandfather gave me more than $342 million. He gave me the knowledge that my worth was never determined by how others treated me. He gave me patience when I wanted to fight back. He gave me a masterclass in playing the long game. The best revenge really is massive success. But not because it hurts the people who underestimated you, though that's a bonus. It's because success built on character, on real work, on genuine relationships, that's the kind that lasts. That's the kind that matters. Never underestimate the quiet person in the corner. We're not weak. We're not invisible. We're just waiting for the right moment to show you exactly what you missed. If this story inspired you, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about people who turned their pain into power. Drop a comment with your thoughts. I read every single one. And if you know someone who's been underestimated, share this with them. Sometimes people need to know their moment is coming. Thanks for watching. I'm Sienna, and remember, value isn't always visible, but it's always there.